Watching a season of Big Brother is one of the most fun experiences I've ever had watching reality TV, but it can be a bit overwhelming for a novice watcher, so I wanted to make this video as a guide to help new Big Brother viewers to go from noob to pro in just a few minutes. I'm going to sort things by chapters, first going through the structure of the game, next explaining live feeds and the best ways to consume them, then go through the must-know lingo, then to the key people, and then end with the best seasons to start with. I'll put timestamps in the description, so head there if you're just looking for something specific. I'll try to go pretty in depth, but for any BB pros that notice anything I missed, feel free to share it with others in the comments. Also, just as a disclaimer, this video is limited to the US and Canadian versions of the game. I'm aware that the rest of the world plays the game in a different format, so if you're looking for the know-how on the show outside of the US or Canada, this video is not for you. Alright, so let's start with the structure of the game. So the game of Big Brother starts with a cast of house guests, typically 16 in a modern non-celeb season, living in a house being watched 24 hours a day. The week begins with a competition to determine which player will become the head of household, or HOH for short. The HOH gets to have a private bedroom and bathroom, as well as some perks like an album and snacks of their choosing. They also choose 2 house guests to put up for elimination. After nominations take place, the veto competition is held. In the US, there are 6 players, the HOH, the 2 nominees, and 3 players selected by random draw. The random draw includes a few chips that allow the person drawing the name to select a player of their choosing to compete for them. In recent Canadian seasons, the HOH doesn't play in the veto, so there are only 5 players. The winner of the veto competition gets to choose if they want to remove a player from the block, aka a player who is nominated for eviction. They don't have to if they don't want to, however. If a player is removed, the HOH then has to nominate another house guest. From there, the 2 nominees spend the week campaigning to the other house guests who have to vote 1 player out each week. The voting is done on the live show and takes place in private, leading to people being able to disguise their vote. Once a player is evicted, the cycle starts anew and a fresh HOH is crowned. You cannot be HOH 2 weeks in a row, barring weird rare twists or circumstances. Big Brother is also majorly into twists, so there's typically some extra competition thrown in that gives away powers or punishments to winners and losers. Alright, so that's the gist of the show, but let's move on to what makes it truly a fun, unique reality TV viewing experience, which is the live feeds. So these are exactly what they sound like, a live look into what's going on in the house. There are typically 4 cameras you can choose from, though they are almost always on 2 angles of the same scene. The camera tends to show the most exciting thing going on inside of the house, though there's not really a way to fact check this, and contestants almost always tell us that we're still missing things when they get out of the house. The cameras are almost always on, even when the house guests are sleeping, but they tend to turn away if someone is changing or things of that nature. They also go down when the house guests are competing in a competition, with the exception of a few HOH competitions, typically endurance comps. We can generally tell pretty quickly who won the comp when the feeds go back up. They also go down for something production wants to say for the edited show. BBCan tends to be worse about having live feeds down more often. With the feeds, we tend to get a very intimate look into the strategy sessions that go on and get to witness the wheels turning in truly great players' heads. We also get to really know the house guests much more than we do the average reality show participant, as we see them at all hours just shooting the breeze. I think because of this intimacy, the viewers get much more intense than they typically do for other shows. Another really cool aspect about the live feeds is that it makes us see through any shady editing tricks. We know that on other shows such as The Bachelor or The Real Housewives, things can be edited to seem different than they really played out. With BB, it's not so easy to do, so the edit tends to follow the reality, though BB Canada has been guilty of changing events to form a more cohesive narrative for the viewers. To watch the US live feeds, they're currently available on Paramount Plus, which you need to subscribe to. You may need a VPN if you live outside of the US, but don't quote me on that. For Canadian live feeds, they're on bigbrothercanada.ca, but you need a VPN if you're not in Canada. The feeds for Canada are free, but as I mentioned, they go down much more. They are also a bit stricter about house guests being a bit cleaner and give them a bedtime, meaning things don't run as late as they usually do on the US feeds. A good trick is to download the Feeds Chrome extension from Liquid8D on Twitter. I'll link their account in the description, as well as any other accounts that I mention in this video. The extension makes it so that it's easier to switch the audio from different cameras, which is very useful when the house is blowing up and you're having to switch back and forth between cams. But if you actually have a life and aren't able to watch feeds all the time, but you still want to keep up with what's going on, there are plenty of great options. We'll start with Twitter. The absolute best account to follow is Big Brother Daily, which transcribes important events on the feeds. They write things out verbatim and don't editorialize, so it's great if you want a no-nonsense version of events. If you want a bit of a spicier experience, my favorite is Hamster Watch. She has both a website and a Twitter where she posts the more fun things that go on in the house. She keeps a running list of goofs and tracks the wreckage of castmates' hairdo as the seasons progress. She just gives me a really good vibe, and I love following her account. She's also been at it for a long time, so if you become psycho like me and want to watch an old season and see what went on the feeds, Hamster Watch is your best bet. If you want a thorough rundown and strategic analysis, the absolute god of BB live feed recaps is Taron Armstrong, who has a podcast through the mega popular Rob Has a Podcast. He goes live on YouTube every day at 11 a.m. Eastern and talks through the previous day. He does a lot of speculation on what could happen in the future, which I really enjoy. He typically has a rotating cast of guests, and many of them are super, super fun. Another option is Madrosed on YouTube. I was only peripherally aware of her before I started prepping for this video, so correct me in the comments if I have anything wrong, but she goes live each day as well on YouTube and provides essentially the same thing as Taron, a recap of the previous day's live feeds. Her videos are also typically shorter, so she should be your go-to if you don't have as much time to spend on keeping up with the feeds. I watched a bit of her videos to get a sense of her, and she's super fun and charming. Her mom also joins her at times. Two other quick things for the feeds. First, follow the feeds bot on Twitter and turn on notifications. This bot tweets when the feeds come back up, so you'll know to head back to them after they've been down for a comp. Second, if you start watching feeds and want to discuss them in the moment, my favorite place is on the BB subreddit. They have a live discussion where you can just write into the void and discuss all of the craziness that's going on with the hive mind. I always really enjoy these threads. You can also comment under the big Twitter accounts if Twitter is more your thing. Alright, so let's do a quick vocabulary lesson. A lot of this has been covered already, so I'll go through those ones quickly. First is HOH, head of household. This is the person in charge of nominations for the week. They're also almost always safe unless there's some twist, but that's rare. Next is veto, sometimes referred to as the power of veto or POV. This is your key to getting off the block. This is typically golden, meaning that the veto holder pulls someone down and the HOH puts a new person up. There have been a few instances of the diamond power of veto where the holder can pull someone down and also select the person that goes up, taking that power away from the HOH. There are also a couple other iterations of the veto, but those are specific to particular seasons and they explain them within that particular season. So next is a pawn. This is someone who is nominated simply as a placeholder. The HOH does not want them going home, but a target is the person the HOH intends on getting out. So next is the backdoor. This is a classic BB move, first introduced in season 5. It happens when the HOH wants to get someone out that they're worried will win the veto. To prevent this, they nominate 2 pawns and hope that the backdoor target isn't able to play in the veto. At the veto ceremony, they remove one of the pawns and put up their intended target, giving them essentially no chance to remove themselves from the block. Some people say it's not a true backdoor if the target played in the veto but didn't win it. Next is slop, a gross oatmeal-y concoction that the house guests are forced to eat as a punishment. If they are on slop, they're typically not allowed to eat anything else besides condiments, except in the middle era when they would get some other weird food as an option. In the early days, they would eat peanut butter and jelly instead of slop. House guests tend to get creative with their slop, trying out new recipes such as slop pancakes. They're typically not happy to be on it. So next is a have-not. This is a group of house guests, typically 4 at the beginning of seasons, who are forced to eat slop and sleep in the have-not room. This is typically very uncomfortable, such as sleeping on spikes of some sort, a dentist chair, or even on ice. It makes the house guests grumpy, but they typically bond quite well when they're have-nots. Sometimes they become have-nots by losing early in a competition, and other times the HOH or outgoing have-nots have to choose the have-nots, which obviously leads to drama. Next is a unitard. This is a costume the house guest has to wear for a certain amount of time. It can be played up for laughs, and I always enjoy seeing them. It's typically a punishment, though not all house guests have seen it that way. It's a BB staple. Next is a house meeting. If you hear a house meeting is happening, run to the feeds. This is when someone calls all of the house guests together to hash out some drama. Many of the show's best moments take place at house meetings. Next is a competition beast. This is someone who is really good at comps. They will typically be a backdoor target as they're hard to get out. Next is a floater. The true definition is someone who floats back and forth between alliances, staying safe in the middle and switching allegiances based on who's in power. This is also often used to mean someone who is just floating along in the game, not really participating all that much, but staying safe because there are bigger threats before them. True scholars know that this is actually a coaster, but you'll hear floater used to mean both things. Next is an alliance. I think you know what an alliance is, but it's a group of people working together. They typically name them in Big Brother, and we usually see a mega alliance form at the beginning of modern seasons. Hope that they implode quickly because seasons that viewers typically hate have a big alliance steamrolling everyone else, and they end up becoming very boring. See Big Brother 22 and Big Brother 16. Next is Zingbot. This is just in the US, but Zingbot is a robot that comes once a season and reads all of the house guests. It's always something that fans look forward to. Next is OTEV, also just in the US. This is a veto competition that is much like musical chairs, as the house guests will tell you, but it's another one that fans always look forward to each season. And last is Marsha the Moose. This is just in Canada, but Marsha is a moose that reveals herself to a house guest and gives them a challenge, typically terrorizing the other house guests, and if the task is accomplished, they get some sort of a reward. Alright, so let's move on to the key people you'll hear referenced often. I'm trying to make this spoiler free, so just because a house guest is listed doesn't mean that they won. Many of the most iconic past house guests didn't win. I'm also going to go pretty bare bones, so lots of important people in the BB world will be left off. These are just the names you'll likely hear referenced often. So first is Julie Chen, host of the US version. She's been at it since season 1, and we've seen a true evolution with her finding God and adding her husband's last name. She's often referred to as Chenbot, as she didn't show much of a personality while hosting the show in the beginning, though that's certainly changed in recent seasons. She often says, "but first," and the show has made it a major thing by adding it as a hashtag on the screen during live shows. Next is Arissa Cox, the host of the Canadian version and now executive producer of the show. Arissa is a true fan and watches live feeds. She's delightful. I just love her so much. She goes on podcasts and is so into the show. It's really endearing. Next is Allison Grodner, executive producer of the US show. If you see her, you know that things have majorly gone down. Fans tend to jokingly blame her for anything going on and claim that she has favorites who are getting advantages. So if you see people talking about Allison, that's who it is. Next is Robin Cass. Until recently, Robin was the casting director for both shows. Now she just casts BBCan. You'll see her name thrown around enough, so that's who Robin is. Next is Dr. Will. He was a contestant on season 2 and 7 of the show and is often credited for making the show what it is. He oozes charm and revels in his villainy. He also hosts a jury roundtable in later seasons, so you'll see him pop up quite a bit. Next is Dan Giesling. Dan was a contestant on seasons 10 and 14. He's incredibly strategic and many people's favorite player of all time. He goes for flashy moves, with many of them having been given a name in the BB community, such as Dan's funeral or nomination roulette. He also pioneered the yelling in the DR thing that we see a lot now. Next is Janelle Pierzina, the player who has been on the most times. She was on season 6, 7, 14, and 22. So we've seen her play in many different phases of her life. Janelle is known for her glamour, many iconic one-liners, and for being a competition beast. She's a massive fan favorite. Next is Derek Levasseur. He was an undercover cop who played on season 16. He pioneered an effective strategy that's unpopular with fans. He's fairly polarizing, with a lot of people loving him, but others feeling that his influence affected Big Brother as a whole in a negative way. Next is Davon Rogers. She's played on seasons 17, 18, and 22. She's most known for her hilarious one-liners and observations, as well as her intuition. She's a majorly beloved character. And last is Aiko Wong. She's from BBCan and has played on seasons 2 and 5. She played a key role in some of Canada's most talked about moments, and she also worked as the Big Brother correspondent for ET Canada for a few years, and her pre-season interviews were a must-watch. So let's end this video with the best places to start the series. I think you have a couple of options. First, the best place to begin is always with any season that's currently airing. Nothing beats the live feed experience, so even if it has returning players, watch a season that's currently airing if you have the option. If you don't, or you want to also watch a past season, you've got a few choices for both the US and Canada. Note that these aren't my favorite seasons necessarily, but the best places to begin. So let's start with BBUS. If you want to be a purist and start from the beginning, that's actually season 2. I know it's a bit strange, but season 1 followed a different format, so skip it. Season 2 aired in 2001, so events of the year play a major factor. It also has an iconic cast, with each person being memorable in some way. It has a satisfying winner and so many fun moments. It is a bit slower than the modern game, and of course it's a bit dated as it aired over 20 years ago. If you want a more modern option, start with season 20. It's a rookie cast, so you don't need to know anyone's background going into it. It also has a really fun and dynamic cast and some magnificent gameplay. You can also go with any of the celebrity seasons. These will give you a good taste of the game since they are much shorter. You also know some of the cast members before, from whatever niche you're into, so pick whichever appeals to you and dive in. For Canada, I think it may be best to start from the beginning. They have a somewhat all-star season in season 5 with half of the cast being return players and half of the cast being newbies. So starting from the beginning will give you the best context for that season 5, which is many people's favorites. Another option is season 6, as it's a really fun season with great characters and some impressive gameplay. Last is my personal favorite, which is season 9, as it's just a wild ride from start to finish. There's not a single boring week. It will definitely get you hooked. If you're looking for a way to watch past seasons, let me know and I'll guide you in the right direction. So that wraps things up for this video. I hope that it was helpful. I'm so excited for you to dive into this crazy world with me. If you want to stay in contact, I have a Twitter and an Instagram. Both are at deeplysuperfish. I'll link it in the description. So feel free to message me on there or leave me a comment if you have any further questions. I'm not sure if I'll see you in the next video as I mainly focus on housewives, so it was great to have you while I did. Bye!